Hello and welcome everybody to Murder Mavens, a true crime podcast. And my name is Lynn, and I am continuing my Karen Reed retrial recaps. Hello to Savage and hello to Lori. Thanks for finding me. Murder Mavens is a pretty new channel, so always appreciate it when I see some friendly names in the live chat. So um, I did a couple of my recaps pre-recorded, and last night I did the day 5 recap live. And I thought that was kind of fun to just have a little bit of a conversation. So I thought today I would go live as well. Let me know in the live chat. Are you following the Karen Reed retrial? And what are your thoughts so far? Because I would love to know. Let's see. I'm wondering, can folks still hear me? Is my computer? I think my computer might be frozen. Um, One sec. Lori, can you hear me? Okay. I think. Okay. Oh, good. For some reason, oh, you can hear. Okay. That's so strange. My computer just froze for a while and I wasn't seeing chats. I thought maybe I was talking to myself. Thanks. Thanks for the confirmation. Okay. Um so Savage says she has to be found guilty this time. And Lori says I'm following but through me. Oh, thanks. Okay, well, so day 6, what happened? I took some notes. We started today off with Ian Whiffen. This was a continuation of his testimony. So he was or I should say, is a digital forensic examiner, and he did a lot of testing with the cell phone data and geo tagging and geolocation data on both, possibly on everybody's phone, but the two phones in question, two hotly contested points of fact were Jen McCabe's text messages and Google searches with regards to when she ran that Google search for how has long to die in cold with the typo, and with regards to John O'Keefe's phone, and more specifically, in his case, it was in regards to the location. So today started with the continuation of cross-examination by attorney Alessi. And I think a couple of things. Hi, Christy, welcome. A couple of things that stood out to me. And if you watch today's trial, let me know if anything stood out to you. But one of the things that, well, there were a couple things. So I didn't kind of nitpick on every single occurrence, but it kind of seemed like the overarching idea from Alessi, or one of them anyhow, was that there were things that Ian Whiffen might have sort of discovered, and he did include in his written report, which he handed over to the prosecution, and the prosecution in turn had to kind of hand that over to the defense during discovery. But when he testified to things earlier, as the prosecutor was questioning him, they didn't really, those facts that were in his report didn't quite make it into the presentation, meaning that, he had a lot in his report. It kind of sounds like maybe his report was fairly comprehensive of the things that he tested, but that the prosecution kind of picked the things that made their case strongest, which makes sense to do, right? They're trying to, present a case, and as such, they're really just trying to kind of cherry pick the evidence that really fits their theory, and try to make a convincing paint a convincing picture for the jury. And so what Alessi did, it seems, is found those areas where, but hey, you didn't mention that XYZ was, also in your report. And some specific things, for example, are there was a map that Leslie showed that was from Ian Whiffin's report, and it showed that the radius, when you factor in the various probabilities of how accurate location data is from a phone, that it actually does indeed cover the a portion of the Albert house. Whereas what was shown in the presentation during his testimony on direct examination, they chose a graphic that did not include that that sort of range, and so it made it seem like John O'Keefe never entered the home, which is what everybody so far, that the prosecution has put up as a witness has said. John never came into the house. Whereas the defense speculates, and I think part of their case is that they believe John did go into the house, that there might have been some kind of a kerfuffle, and maybe he was tossed out or whatever, right? Um, so the fact that Ian Whiffen did have a graphic that would suggest it is within the realm of possibility when you look at, the range and, possible accuracy of phone data, that John might have at one point gone into the house. Um, the other thing that would also indicate that could be a possibility is the fact that he showed that the GPS location data jumped around. John's phone GPS location data jumped around from the house to the road, like in front of the house, multiple times. Because kind of like it can't really pinpoint where he is. And so it's just jumping around between 2 points of location, like, okay, he's somewhere within this vicinity. Maybe he's, like, a little bit closer to, like, one cell tower, and so that one thinks that he might be over here at the road, and then maybe sometimes his signal is maybe stronger from another cell tower, but it puts his location inside the house. And maybe he's somewhere in between, we don't know, but the point is that the data shows that there is GPS data that puts him in the house, and it oscillates back and forth between inside the house and somewhere on the road. all this to say that if we're gonna use, I guess, GPS location as a thing to as evidence to make our decisions based on, I feel like we would have to consider that it's possible that John went inside the house because there's data that would suggest it. And that data wasn't initially presented during the prosecution's case, so that's why the defense is bringing it up. There was a lot of information about, let me know your thoughts on this, friends, because there was some information about the, temperature of the battery in the phone, and everybody concedes that a phone cannot detect the temperature of, like, its surroundings, like, of the room or, wherever it's at. But the phone does have a reading on the temperature of your battery. I think you know how sometimes if you're like taxing your phone heavily, it might overheat sometimes. I get on my phone a little warning message if I'm using my phone too much and it might overheat. I actually get a warning message. So somehow it can detect that the battery's warming up too much. And I think that's where this data that they were talking about is coming from and how it's used by the phone. Okay, yeah, Savage says you get that too. Okay. So I think that's the data that they're looking at when the expert Ian Whiffen did a test where oh, yours will actually just turn itself off, Savage. Okay. Um, I think mine gives me the warning before it turns off, but sometimes it does shut down if I ignore it. Um, so he did an experiment, Ian Whiffen did an experiment where he took a phone and then he put it in the freezer, and then he just kind of measured he read, like, the phone temperature data as it was, I guess, like, in the freezer to see how much would the battery temperature drop. And in theory, that would correlate to maybe, I'm not sure what he was trying to compare it to be honest. So, I think they were trying to suggest that John and his phone were maybe outside starting at a specific time, and so the temperature of the battery, was dropping, and that would suggest that he was outside that whole time. I think that was what they were trying to get at, but here's the thing that Alessi, the defense attorney, pointed out. When the expert did his test where he put the phone in the freezer and then he measured, the temperature, minute by minute or whatever, the temperature dropped something like 50 degrees within 15 minutes. So 50 degrees within 15 minutes. And when they look at John O'Keefe's actual phone battery temperature data at around the 12:30 time frame, because I think that's a key time frame because that's when the defense or the prosecution is alleging that, he must that Karen Reed hit him with her car and then left him outside and drove off. So they're saying from 12:30-ish, um, they start to see the battery temperature drop, but it only dropped like 11 degrees or something like that in the course of 15 minutes, where the freezer test was the battery temperature dropped by 50 degrees. And it's not a very scientific way to test this at all, but even if it was like a scientific and robust way of testing it, I kind of feel like um it's not really suggestive. The test is not suggestive of John being outside that whole time because the temperature didn't drop as much as it did as it did when the phone was in the freezer. Um, so it is kind of strange. And Savage says, "Okay, that's probably what it was." Okay, yeah, and so I just kind of feel like I think the defense scored a couple points there in the sense that the cell phone testing and some of the data, it doesn't. I don't think it's convincingly pointing one way or another. I just don't think that the cell phone data proves the prosecution's case, which means that I feel like there's an opening for some doubt there. Um, so kind of feel like um this witness sort of like not great for the prosecution, but it's not like they had like a big aha moment for the defense either. Like, nobody was caught in a lie and there wasn't anything super ridiculous about his testimony. It just opens questions. But what I thought was actually curious though is that Alessi did actually get this expert witness when he was talking about, and let me know if you guys caught this too, because Alessi started asking him questions about how the deletions of certain text messages and whatnot, how those deletions could have occurred on Jen McCade's phone. And in Ian Whiffin's report, he said that it could have happened in a number of different ways, and he had listed 3 or 4 different ways that those files or those texts could have been deleted. And Alessi actually got him to say, "Well, then does that mean you have some doubt as to how exactly these text messages were deleted?" And the expert says, yes, he has some doubts. And then Alessi said, "Would you characterize those as reasonable?" And he said, "Yes," meaning he got this expert witness to say that there's reasonable doubt about how the deletions on, at least on Jen's, phone happened. And I know that's different from reasonable doubt about Karen committing the crime, but I don't think it helps the prosecution when their own witness has reasonable doubt about some facts that they are testifying to. So I thought in terms of, scoring, for trying to say, oh, did the defense score some points? I would say that was kind of a point scored. There was something I was a little confused about, and I tried to find it on replay to listen to it again. So if somebody remembers this, let me know because I can't quite remember exactly, but there was like a line of questioning where Leslie asked this expert witness how many times he had ever been to Canton, and he said something like two or something. And it was suggestive of the fact that he had driven around um, on the path, I guess that John's geo data would suggest, that he was. Um, And that he tried to, like, essentially kind of reenact something to see if it would follow the geo-tracking from John's phone, and yet, none of that made it into the report or the presentation, and, at least the conclusion of it, none of that, um, came in. And but then he wasn't allowed to ask any more questions about it. So I don't know if I just heard that part wrong or took the wrong thing away from it. But I'm gonna try to rewatch a little bit of that testimony, see if I can find it again, because that would be curious if this expert tried to like reenact John's last, you know, moments and tried to kind of reenact what might have happened with the phone and how the data that was extracted from the phone, if they could replicate that in a way that was consistent with the prosecution's case. But if they were not able to do that, and then they just simply kind of gave up on that test because it didn't align with their story, then it would be interesting if that was the case. So, because I would presume that if they were able to reenact it, then obviously they would have included that in their report and in their presentation on the direct examination. And then, Brennan did do a redirect after the cross-examination, and so he asked some follow-up questions to try to I think the thing is that I think Brennan kind of clued into the fact that Alessi was trying to maybe, through his line of questionings, but not outright directly accusing, but I think he was just trying to get to suss out, like, did this expert witness have a conclusion, like have a theory of the case, and then try to find evidence to support that theory, or was this expert just hired to make an analysis of the data without knowing, what the actual outcome it was or what the prosecution's theory of the case was, just like as a casual, third party observer and, technical expert, what do they think happened, if going into it as unbiased as possible. And so with Brennan's, redirect questions, I think he really pushed on that where he was like, "Did we ever talk about the case beforehand? Did I tell you what the theory of the case was? Did I tell you what my assumptions were? Blah, blah, blah." And the expert said, "No, none of that happened." So I think we can kind of rule out that he was trying to, like, fit the facts to the story as opposed to, just finding the truth of what happened wherever the facts, take you. So, that wrapped up Ian Whiffen, and here's one thing that I will say just in terms of, um, I really like, Attorney Alessi because there wasn't like a ton of back and forth ping-ponging of the lawyers asking questions, whereas I think with Alan Jackson and David Yannetti, who were the other 2 defense lawyers, I feel like every time they've cross-examined somebody, there's always, like, a few rounds back and forth, and they keep, like, nitpicking and just, like, driving a point dead into the ground until you just don't even care anymore or you've forgotten what the point is. I kind of feel like Alessi went in there, he kept his cross-examination really on point. He let Brennan have, the last word, and then he just, he let it go. He didn't feel the need to get back up and counterpunch yet again or whatever. So I kind of like that. The next witness to take the stand was Jennifer McCabe. Interesting that she I kind of find it interesting the order that they're doing this in because they brought the expert in, um, and to talk about her actual phone, and what happened with her phone and things like that. So we kind of a little bit know, especially for this jury, if they shouldn't have watched the first trial if they're seated on this jury. I don't think. I think they would have screened all of those people out. And so they should be coming in fairly fresh and really not knowing much about this, what happened during the first trial and the specifics. And so, I wonder if they're confused or if they're following along okay, because it's, um I thought it was weird that the expert was, like, really scrutinizing things that were happening on her phone, but we haven't heard from her at all yet, until now. So, Brennan did the direct examination, and I agree with you, Savage, less, talking, less facts askew. Yeah, I think they just kind of laid it out there, and instead of getting into the weeds, they just let I mean, it's up to the jury to determine what they wanna believe are the facts, and so they just put it out there, and, it's a lot easier, I think, to follow. But Gemma Key talked about just sort of her background and everything, and then she talked about, um her recounting of, the night of drinking on that Friday night, and then the Saturday when they went out to look for John O'Keefe. Um, it's kind of interesting the the little details that are being brought up, and this is the second time. I mean, obviously, they've been through this entire trial once before, and so they've definitely been, like, prepped by their lawyers to, um not in the case in the sense of, like, what to say, but just, how to comport themselves on the stand and, how to, things that they're supposed to allowed to mention and things they're not allowed to mention and things like that. But both, Carrie Roberts, who has already testified, and, Jennifer McCabe, both of them were in the car with Karen Reed to drive around looking for John on that morning when he didn't come home. And so, yeah, that too, Savage, what not to do, because they're supposed to just kinda stick to, like, just answer the question that you're asked and don't, like, expound. But, but it was interesting the details, little details that I don't know if she is saying that she realized those things at the time or just in retrospect, you know, it's occurred to her. But I watched the behavior panel, and that's like these 4 guys who are behavioral analysts, and they kind of look at body language and language choice and stuff like that to kind of read, whether somebody is, I mean, they do, like, interrogations and, they read people and stuff like that. And oh, Savage likes them too. So so you might appreciate this. You've probably heard this before then. So Chase Hughes is one of the 4 on the panel, and I mentioned this earlier during Carrie Roberts', the recap of her, testimony, but Chase Hughes has said that one of the things to look for is, and it's not like a strict determination of, like, guilt or innocence, but it's just one of the things to look for is where are the details in the retelling of a story? So where do you see like a peak where there's a spike or a lot of details, and where do you see like a valley, an absence of details? And he said often deception is when there's a lot of extraneous details that are not really relevant to the main matter at hand, and there are fewer details around the things that really matter, and it's a way to kind of make yourself feel like you're being honest because, "Oh, think look how good your memory is, you can remember even these small little details." But when somebody is, like, in a crisis, those little small details are probably not the things that they would remember because that's not top of mind important to them. And so one of the things that I, kinda noticed with Jennifer McKeeb was, and she's not the only one to have said this, but, like, at one point, they all met up or returned to John's house, and coming into the house, I guess everybody took off their shoes except for Karen Reed. And John's house is a house, where it's shoes off. Like that was his policy. He was very strict about it, apparently, and um, and so everybody is now making sure to mention, everybody so far, being Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe, that yeah, we all went back to John's house, and then we entered in through this door. I think it was like the garage door, the door that goes from the garage to your house. And then I took off my shoes. It's a weird detail to mention, right? Like your friend is missing. Like admittedly, I don't think they would necessarily class Karen Reed as their friend, but Karen is telling them John, who is their friend, both Carrie's friend and Jen McCabe's friend, the girlfriend of who you would consider a friend of yours, says, "I can't find John," and she's panicked, and she's like in hysterics according to them, right? She's like just screaming and she's just like loud and yelling and screaming. She tells you that she can't find John. He never came home last night. She's worried. She thinks she might have even hit him with his car, blah blah blah. And they happen to remember that as they coming into their his house that they took their shoes off, but Karen did not. Doesn't that seem weird? I mean, I think savage is you're weird for that. Is it weird for you too? Um, and so that's one thing that they're saying, and they're kind of suggesting that Karen doesn't care about taking her shoes off in John's home at this point because she already knew he was dead. I think that's basically the between the lines of what they're trying to suggest. That but I read it this way. Karen doesn't give a care about whether she's tracking mud into his home. She wants to find John. It's like not even a priority to her that like she because they were like, what if he's already home? Let's just go back to his house and see if he's back. And so yeah, she's gonna rush into the house. And I if it were me, I would just rush my house is a shoes off house too. I would I would just if I thought my husband was missing and my friends are telling me, "Let's just go home, see if he's home yet," I would just run in to see. I don't care about my shoes. I just wanna see if he's home. And I don't know, it just seems strange that this is even, like, a detail that warrants bringing up, but I kind of feel like, they're trying to find as many facts to fit, their narrative, and whether they noticed it at the time or they just kind of in thinking back, kind of remembered it, it just seemed weird. And it's the same thing with the taillight. I think the taillight being broken is another big point of contention, but the reality is that whatever, Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe's memory is, there's video footage that shows the taillight wasn't missing pieces when Karen Reed, backed out of the garage or the driveway or whatever in those early morning hours to go look for John. So, um, there's video evidence. No, I think again, I brought it up again. Yeah, I brought it up first earlier with Carrie Roberts' testimony. The same thing where this seems to be like a detail spike where they're like, yeah, and then I walked across Karen was saying maybe I hit him or whatever. Did I hit him? And I saw that her taillight was cracked and it was missing some pieces and the reason why I remember is that those jagged pieces, somebody's coat could get snagged on it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, your friend is missing. You don't know where he's at. There's a blizzard. He didn't come home after a night of drinking, where there's a lot of drinking, apparently. And you think to yourself as you're walking by a car with a busted taillight, oh, somebody's coat could get snagged on that. So I kind of feel like, that's just not the sort of thing that would be running through my mind if this was a crisis. And and I to be honest, I just kind of feel like the things that they are attributing to in terms of Karen Reed's behavior, I think they just continue to underscore the fact that she was out of her mind not knowing where John was. If she had killed him with intent, because that's what she's charged with second degree murder, which is murder with intent, then I feel like wouldn't she just try to play it off and let somebody else bring the news to her and act all surprised? Like, why would she go into hysterics calling up everybody at 5, 6 a.m. asking if they have seen him. So it just does not like make sense to me anyhow if she had done this. Maybe she did, and maybe she's just like a real like mastermind. And Anthony, I see your comment. Kanuni is corrupt. Well, we do know that she has like connections. There's some relationships with her and the Alberts, some the sphere within the Alberts. Um, but that seems to be like that's this town. The Albert family has a lot of influence in the town, and like Brian Albert is a police officer. Kevin Albert, his brother, is a police officer. Chris Albert is a city selectman, which I think is an elected official, like city council, I think, right? So, you know, they have positions of influence and authority. And so and it's a small town too. So I think like kind of everybody knows them. Um, so Judge Canoni did cut the testimony short. I have one more note because I was taking some notes as I was watching. The other note was that I thought this was really interesting and very like I think reads very truthful. But again, I think more helpful for Karen to be honest. But as the three of them are driving around, and I think it's Carrie Roberts who's driving, and Karen and Jen McCabe who are in the car as passengers. Um, both Jen McCabe and, and Carrie Roberts said that Karen was, like, hysterical, and she kept saying, like, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him? What if he got hit with a plow?" But she's just, like, going through all these scenarios of, what could explain why he's not home, why he didn't go home, and the reason is because actually, what's really interesting is that I'm just realizing this now, so sorry, this is a little bit of a derail, but earlier, I think it was like day 2 or something, a bunch of text messages were read into trial, and in the text message exchange between John and Karen, he was assuming that she would just come over and stay the weekend with him. And they got into a fight about a plumber fixing her hot water issue because she didn't want to be without hot water for the entire weekend. And John was like, "What? What do you mean? I thought you were gonna be in Canton, all weekend. I can come over on Monday and fix it for you Monday," meaning that he thought that she was going to stay over with him. But then she told him, "Well, you said that the dynamic between the 4 of us isn't a healthy one, so I wanna try to minimize that." The 4 of us being John, Karen, and John's, niece and nephew. So she basically told him, "I'm not planning to at your place, the weekend." And so, interestingly Karen was under the assumption that John knew she wasn't gonna be at his house, and that's why she was really alarmed that he didn't come home because his niece would have been home alone, and he would have never left his niece home alone. And so that's why she was panicked. I mean, she did in the end go back to his house, um, but that's why she was really panicked when she woke up and he wasn't there because she knew the last thing she, had said to him was that she wasn't planning to spend the weekend with him. But I think they had a nice night out at the bar like, uh, up until she dropped him off at the Albert House, and then he never, he never came back out, and he didn't answer her calls, and then she started thinking that, he was cheating on her and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, so, um, all that to say is that's why she was so panicked that, he wasn't home. And so the last note that I had was that both Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts were saying that she was, like, really hysterical in the car and that, when that Carrie Roberts kept having to tell her to shut up, just calm down and shut up because she was, I guess, screaming so much. And she was another little detail spike was that Carrie told her to put her seatbelt on. Um, and again, just seems like a weird detail to mention in your recounting of the morning that you found your friend dead, you know, on somebody's front lawn, that you would remember a detail like, "Oh, yeah, we were driving around, she didn't have her seatbelt on." But it was a blizzard, and I guess they were trying to be careful and drive carefully, so maybe it was worth, like, noting. But again, I would say that Karen's state of mind is such that the priority of what's taking occupying her brain space is what has happened to John. She's not caring about his dirty floors and tracking mud into his house. She's not even caring for her own safety and putting on her seatbelt as they drive around. She's trying to look for John O'Keefe as they drive around and trying to figure out, have it make sense in her head what has happened to him, what could have possibly happened to him. And so, I think that was her top priority. And, and the fact that Jenna Cabe and Carrie Roberts are adding these little details, I just feel like they kind of help Karen's case because, um, you know, if she was really out of her mind, out of her wits about, it's like she can't win because, you know, like if she was calm, cool, and collected, they would say, well, she was way too calm, cool, and collected. She must have known something, happened. Um, so, it just kind of feels like you really can't win. And if for anyone who watched the Lori Daybell trial that just happened, that's exactly one of the things that the prosecution was saying was like, oh, Lori Daybell, she just found her husband Charles Daybell dead, um and she's super calm about it and very non-reactive and, joking. Now that was very unusual. And so, however you're supposed to comport yourself when you find a loved one pass away, I don't think there's any standards, right? So, however you react, I think it can be painted and used, against you and for you. It's just subjective. So that's where they ended the day in terms of witness testimony. Now, in terms of the lawyers still had a bit of work that they did, and then that was with regards to the ARCA experts. So, with regards to ARCA, um, if you haven't been following what's been happening with ARCA, they did a voir dire yesterday. And so a large part of the voir dire was to figure out if, I don't know, the defense was like destroyed evidence, so to speak, or, communications, and were they trying to be like shady in their dealings with ARCA and in what they turned over during discovery as it pertains to ARCA. Now, ARCA, that's the name of the company. There are two experts who came to Canton yesterday for a voir dire. And they were asked a bunch of questions as to like what were all these communications between them and the defense, and why didn't they save all of their text messages from like over a year ago? Like, I just don't understand um, why you would be expected to keep your text messages, especially these guys. They're like professionals. I doubt that they would keep every text message they ever send to, other colleagues that they work with. But in any case, they had the two experts do a voir dire, were subjected to some questioning, And the prosecution, um, uh, Hank Brennan, so he made a motion actually to he didn't phrase it this way, but essentially I think it came down to him phrasing his motion was to exclude ARCA from testifying about any new reports and testing that they were doing because they're going to do some now that they can be hired by anybody, defense or prosecution. The defense has hired them and has hired them specifically to do an additional test to vet the testimony that the prosecution plans to put on from the new expert that they hired to do a accident reconstruction. So trial number 1, they had a police officer who had some, like, maybe, like, 10 hours of course training on how to reconstruct an accident, and he just did a very terrible job, that was not very convincing, and he's not an expert in it, he's actually, like, a police officer, so he's more expert in doing that, but he's had training. He's had some training, and he took some courses and stuff like that, but that doesn't really make you an expert. So this time around, Hank Brennan actually hired an expert accident reconstructionist, it sounds, and so the defense wants to hire ARCA, who did a really good job the first time around, to do some additional testing and essentially to vet the report that the prosecution's expert um, turned over and see if they come to the same conclusion or not. So that's the testing that's the new testing that they want ARCA to do. Now they've only been given the green light to hire ARCA in like February or something. So they're working pretty fast at this, but that said, it's past the deadline for like new discovery and yada yada. But the so Hank Brennan made a motion to exclude ARCA from testifying to any new experiments or reports. But then he also said, and exclude them from testifying to their first report, which was what they testified to during the first trial. So basically, he wants to exclude ARCA from testifying. And he's been saying up like left, right, and center, "Hi, Linda, welcome," that he's not trying to say that ARCA can't testify. He's not afraid of that. But here he is now making a motion to exclude their testimony. Um, so the Judge Canoni, she asked Alessi, who's the defense lawyer arguing this motion, what does he have to say for himself? Hi, Christina, welcome. And so he, and she was like, okay, be quick, Mr. Alessi. But she was like, I have one question for you. How do I, square the fact that the standard codes of conduct dictates that you are supposed to keep all communications on an active trial for something like 10 years. And and Mr. Alessi goes, well, because that standard doesn't apply. Because the standard is that you're supposed to keep all communication between you and your client. His client is Karen Reed. And the text messages that are in question, because a bunch like over 100 text messages got deleted, those are text messages between the defense firm, legal, all the lawyers who were involved at the time, all the lawyers involved at the time on the defense side, and the ARCA experts who are not their clients. So the that standard doesn't even apply, and that's all she allows him to say, and then she goes, "I'm gonna cut you off right there because you're gonna win this motion." And I was like, Okay, so really she just wanted to like admonish the defense, which she's very, she's not shy about admonishing the defense and making them kind of look bad. Now, this isn't in front of the jury. None of this is happening in front of the jury. So that's good. But she really takes every opportunity, I think, that she can to make it known that she does not think well of this defense team. And she lets the prosecution, Hank Brennan, get away with uh, all sorts of stuff that she does not let the defense do. So ultimately, her ruling was this, that she's going to allow the ARCA experts to testify. They can do whatever additional testing that they are intending to do. They must supply that report by March 7th. Whatever this new testing is that they need to conduct it, and they need to submit a report that then has to get turned over to the prosecution. And then, she's basically letting the defense put on the defense that they want to put on. She did say, ultimately, the defendant has a right to run, to put on a strong defense, or I forget how she worded it, but whatever the legal way of wording it is. And that is the most important thing at the end of the day. Uh, and she's always, of course, got to put a final dig. And she's like, so in spite of the defense team, basically like eschewing or like, neglecting their standard rules of, conduct or whatever it is, and the multiple infractions to, her earlier emotions and whatnot, she's still going to allow um, the ARCA experts to testify. So, Linda, she pisses me off with how she shuts down the defense. She is not honorable in my opinion. Yeah. You know, it's I it is frustrating to see because I agree with you. I just feel like, and she does it in front of the jury too. It's not just these motions outside of the jury's presence that she's showing her bias. Um I don't think it's quite as like open when she's in front of the jury, so I think she's trying to kind of rein it in and be fair, but I kind of feel like, she's just very I don't think she can help it because I don't think she's aware that she's doing it. Um, oh, this is a good question. Where do you all watch the trial? Um yeah, so folks watching the trial live, you can drop wherever you happen to be watching the live trial coverage. Christina, for me, I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, so I actually I don't watch the direct feed. I sometimes watch the direct feed, which I think you can get on Court TV. And then I also sometimes watch Andrea Burkhart because she does like live trial coverage, and so I watch her restreaming like the live footage, and because I kind of like Andrea Burkhart's commentary because I feel like she keeps it to the legal commentary of things, and she's a little bit more, like, straightforward. I like Emily D. Baker, she's covering it live too, but for one, I kind of like to support smaller channels. Emily D. Baker has, like, 35,000 people watching her live stream. Like, she has, so many people watching her channel, it's like all of the other channels, including the source feeds, like Course TV, like, times 5 or something crazy like that. So I try to support smaller channels. And um, Andrea Burkhart's channel isn't even like tiny, but it's hard to compete with Emily D. Baker. Um, yeah, I agree with you, Linda. She's always admonishing. These are the subtle ways. I think it's kind of subtle if you're not already like hip to it. But she kind of finds those ways, like she keeps on, I feel, like directing the defense on how to question, and okay, move it along. Okay, ask a new question. Don't interrupt the witness. But when Brennan does it, it's like crickets. And unless and until the defense actually objects, then and only then will she say something. And Hank Brennan happily ignores her. So like during uh today's both witnesses, Hank attorney Alessi kept having to raise objections, and in theory, because Hank was leading the witness, and if it's your own witness, you're not allowed to lead your own witness. You just have to ask open questions, and they need to answer it. You can't like provide the answer that you want them to say in your question. And the so he kept leading his witness, but now he is by practice, I think, typically a defense attorney. But it's not like the judge was telling him to ask, move it along or whatever. And it was only if the defense actually said objection that she would have to tell him, um, ask it differently. And he kept doing it, and they kept objecting, so she had to keep on telling him, "Ask it differently, ask it differently." But clearly, he doesn't care what you want him to do. He's just gonna do whatever he does. Um, uh, oh gosh, Savage says, "I'll have to listen in more. I have ADHD and I get distracted." Yeah, it's easy to be because some of these testimonies are so dry. Okay, so Linda's watching from Emily D. Baker and a couple others. Okay, yeah, Emily D. Baker's another is a great one. She's funny to watch. She has very funny reactions. So when I'm looking for like humor, I listen to Emily D. Baker. Um, but if I'm looking for just like the straight legal commentary, I listen to Andrea Burkhart. Oh, hey, Carrie. OMG, it should be working, but then I saw this. Oh, thanks, friend. Um, oh yeah, Crime Junkies is covering it. Yeah. I'll have to check in on theirs too. I haven't watched I know Crime Junkies, but I haven't been really watching their live trial coverage, so gonna definitely check in on that. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Linda. I think Emily D. Baker has such fun. She's just funny. She's just fun to watch. Um, I'm a few days behind on watching the trial from yeah. Well, Carrie, I have been posting daily trial recaps, but in my recaps, I'm not doing a rewatch, so I don't do recaps in that way. And so I just recap the couple few points that like really struck me. I'm not trying to like retell the trial, what happened that day. So my recaps might not be like the most thorough, but that's not my intent. I just want to kind of give my thoughts on, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm just somebody who might find themselves on a jury, so find it kind of fun to chat with all of you and get your impressions and to share my impressions too. Um, yep, she's too partial, yeah, to the prosecutors. I think the trial should have been moved somewhere else with a new judge, or even just having a different judge might have helped substantially, I feel. Um, because and the only reason why I say that is because the first trial resulted in a hung jury, so I kind of feel like a lot of but, you might be right, Linda, because remember I don't know if you all remember, but after the first trial, some of the jurors talked, to the press, and one gentleman in particular, I think, had gone on a lot of news outlets and talked about the deliberation and things like that, and, He said, though, that a lot of people were just very, like, dug in. They had their heels dug in on a couple certain points, and one of the scariest things that he said to me anyways, as just, like, a citizen of the United States, is that, um, he said that a lot of people felt Karen was, not guilty. Well, he said unanimously, they found her not guilty of the first charge, which is murder in the second degree, and she was not guilty of the third charge, but what they were debating was whether she was guilty of, I think, like, essentially, like, vehicular manslaughter, kind of, that it was an accident, she might have hit him with the car, but that it was an accident, it wasn't premeditated, and that's what they were debating, and there were several people who could not be convinced because, she was the one who was arrested and nobody else was, as if the police never arrest the wrong person. Like, that was essentially their contention, was that, well, he's dead, she was there, she's the one who got arrested, she must have done it. And that was their logic, and they were dug in on it. And they're like, "Well, no one else was arrested, so it must have been her." But then, like, the police did such a bad job of actually, investigating this crime. They didn't question anybody else. They didn't have any other suspects, and some would even suggest that they were very motivated not to look beyond Karen Reed. So, you might be right, Linda, that, like, it might have been better if this was moved to a different jurisdiction where maybe there isn't as much of this, like, Brian Albert, like, the Albert family connections so intertwined in the community. Um, so, yeah. Um, Carrie says there was no big bomb that dropped, like, someone spilled what really happened. No, not yet. It's a lot the same. They're putting on much the same, um, theory of the case of what happened. It's just that this time, I mean, there's the prosecution is still contending all the same things, that Karen Reed backed into him, that night at 12:30 or whatever, and then left him, for dead, essentially. But that she did it intentionally because 'cause they're still charging her with second degree murder, which is not premeditated, that would be first degree, but intentional murder. Um, I also like LV LV cops. Getting a law enforcement take helps to show how messy and screwed up, this whole thing is, yeah. Totally. I mean, it's very it's it's so wrong. Like, all the things that they did were so unprofessional, all the solo cup business. I mean, I can't wait till we get to that in this trial. Um, Something like that. Yeah, Judge Canoni, I can't remember what the connection is. Maybe somebody in chat knows. But yeah, there is a connection between Judge Canoni and the Albert family in some way or fashion. I just can't remember exactly what that is. Um, um, yeah, but I think, Linda, what they're trying to say is, like, when she dropped him off at the house, uh, when she backed away to leave, that's when she hit him. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really think any of the I think the defense has all the evidence and the facts on their side, to be honest. Because if sh so, but, let's put it this way, in my mind, if she did it, then their, you know, police department and their legal system has not done John O'Keefe's family justice, because they just mishandled this in so many ways. And, because I do feel like there's enough reasonable doubt, that that would suggest that, many other things could have happened that night, and that the facts that they do have, I don't think completely line up, with the story that they are putting forward. I hate it when they say that they arrested. Yeah, exactly, Christina. That's not how it's supposed to work, but, I think I hear a lot of defense attorneys say, the the person sitting next to the defense, attorney is basically sitting in the guilty chair, right? Because you wouldn't be facing criminal charges if you weren't a criminal. And so I think there's, like, people have this assumption that, well, you must have done something wrong if you found yourself in that chair. And that's just not what our legal system that's not how our legal system is supposed to work. You're supposed to be presumed innocent until you're proven otherwise, but just doesn't seem like that, always. I mean, we all have our biases, right? And it's hard to put all of that aside. How many people are involved in the cover up and framing of Karen? I don't watch, the first trial, so I'm not sure. Oh, Edith. Oh, that's a good question. It's hard to know how. Okay, here, the other thing that I'll say, Edith, is that I don't know how much of it is like intentional cover up versus incompetence, because it could be both. It could be like they're just bad at their jobs. Um, but how many people would have to be involved? Quite a fair few. I mean, almost almost everybody who was on this case somehow got some kind of, uh, like, punishment, I guess, or whatever. So, for example, Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, he's since been fired. Brian Albert, his brother Kevin Albert, is a Canton cop, and he was suspended because of some early evidence handling or something when he should have been abstained from touching anything to do with this case. So he got suspended. And then several other cops, I can't remember all of them, who were part of the investigation, had some kind of, you know, reprimand, punishment, some kind of suspension levied to them. So, quite a lot. And then Judge Canoni is doing her part too. So there's her. Um, there are some people who I feel like have been very like honest about stuff, like the medical examiner. She did not cave. She knew that the prosecution wanted her to rule this a homicide, but when she wrote out the death certificate, she did not say that it was an accident, nor did she say it was a homicide. She took the third option, which was undetermined. So she just tried to like ride the fence, like be neutral about it. But they were certainly pushing her, the medical examiner, to say it was homicide. Yep. That should be enough on its own, but to get this toss, but not for these prosecutors. Um, so yes, to this too. I mean, and that's what he was fired for, was his conduct during this investigation, and that is for sure coming out at this trial. They've already mentioned it in opening statements, so you can bet the defense team is going to they're going to make a point of this. And what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think the prosecution will put Michael Proctor on the stand? For those of you who are familiar and watch the first trial, because he's the lead investigator. How could you not put your lead investigator on the stand? But then he's been fired for his conduct on this case. So, uh, you know, do you put your lead investigator on the stand when you know that he's already like not a good witness? Um, yep, there's that. Yeah, the leaf blower is just it is wild. And you know what's really silly? I don't know if I'm a little bit behind in chat, but what's silly is that they said that the red taillight pieces There were red taillight pieces broken from Karen Reed's car when she hit him at 12:30 or whatever, and they weren't found the day of when they were leaf blowing the snow away to try to collect evidence. They didn't see these red pieces of taillight, but they did see the clear glass, like the like alcohol glass that supposedly John O'Keefe had in his hand when he was hit. So they were able to find, that morning that they found his body, they were able to find and collect clear pieces of glass, but somehow everybody missed red broken taillight until they came back a couple days later and then, "Whoa, look at this. We found a bunch of pieces of red taillight from Karen Reed's car that wasn't quite as busted if you look at the Ring camera footage from from John's house." So, yeah. I think that's I feel like they didn't make a big deal of that the first time around. Um, yep. I mean, yeah, I think everybody, I wonder how much people are just like afraid of the Albert family and whether they are trying to cover up for him or not. They're enabling him to get away with um and I'm not even thinking that the Alberts intentionally like murdered John or anything like that, but I do think something happened. I think it was an accident, and it's really suspicious. If you talk about like guilty conscience, you know, how do you explain the Albert family rehoming their family dog of 6 years within 6 months of this happening? How do you explain the Albert family selling a custom design and built home that's been in their house for generations within a year of this happening? Like, they are trying to distance themselves so far from everything that has anything to do with this case. And, to be honest, like, part of it could be if I'm playing devil's advocate, they may have sold the home because, somebody was found dead there, and that's gonna be traumatic. So, if you wanna play devil's advocate, that could be a reason, but I could see it the other way too. Um, Rumor is there was boxing in the basement, rumor, no evidence, but the Apple Health, yeah, and yeah, exactly. I mean, there's I think that is the defense's case, is that there was some sort of a fight. Um, and yep. Yes to this, Carrie. Like, there's a whole scene in front of your house. You are a cop yourself and you never come outside to see what's going on. I mean, yeah. Oh, I even forgot. Yes, the cell phones. Like, especially Brian Higgins, like, he destroys his SIM card, drives to, like, an army base and dumps it in the army base trash. So, I mean, it's not just that he got rid of it. I mean, he went to lengths to get rid of it and make sure that it was never found and could not be retrieved. Um, so Carrie, for my viewing pleasure, they should put him on the stand. Well, here's the thing. I think if the prosecution doesn't put him on the stand, you can be sure the defense will. So, yeah, I agree with you, Linda. How could they not? But he's bad news for them. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like, it's gonna look shady if they don't, but I don't know how they make him look good. It's not how I just don't think it's possible. That's funny. Let's blow away all the evidence. Have you ever been to a crime scene before? I know better from watching Law& and Order. Yeah, Savage, I agree. I agree with you. I think whatever happened that night it was an accident and a tragic accident, and I feel bad for John O'Keefe's family because I think they just want answers. They might not like Karen Reed, but I think they just prefer to know the truth of what happened, and they're being denied that. And having to go through this whole thing over again is just I just feel really bad for them. I think John O'Keefe's dad isn't even in the courtroom every day because I think he's just it's just, you know, too much for him. Um, oh, this is interesting. Attorney Larry Foreman. Oh, okay. He's new. I haven't seen his he's another channel, Linda. Is he another channel on YouTube? I'll have to check that out. Um they're just Linda, they're just they're very heavy sleepers. All right. See you later, Christina. Uh, hubby is cutting his hair. Oh, to donate. Oh, that's cool. How awesome. Um, wow, that's so cool. That's really awesome of him. Um, I cut my husband's hair too, but once it's like, half an inch or an inch, it's too long. No, I exaggerate. I think the last time I cut my husband's hair was just like a few days ago, and it was kind of long. It was probably like maybe an inch and a half or so, maybe 2 inches. I've gotten good at giving haircuts though, if I do say so myself. All right. So friends, thanks for hanging with me on this recap. And if I can find the time tomorrow to do a recap live, I'll try. But otherwise, I'm gonna try to find like half an hour just to at least, do a pre-recorded recap like I did for the first couple few days. But I really like being able to do this live so that I can chat with you guys and get your pulse, on things too. So that's been really fun. And I appreciate you all being here and finding me. I know there's lots of people covering this trial, so thanks. Thanks for hanging, friends. All right. I'll let you all get back to your day, and I hope you have a good evening. And I hope you'll be here tomorrow for my recap, whether it's pre recorded or it's live. All right, everybody, take care and good night.